Topic is the long game of building a truly representative democracy, rethinking strategies for investment and movement building. I am the moderator for panel 3. We're going to be looking at, looking really towards the future of elections and the actions policymakers, researchers, and advocates can take to build a representative democracy over time. And our panelists will discuss how we can reshape current approaches to meet communities where they are in 2024 and beyond. So, quick introduction of our panelists. All right. First up, Abril Gallardo Cervera was born in Hidalgo, Mexico, where she lived until immigrating to the United States. It was her experience as an immigrant that has contributed to her being an organizer for over a decade in Arizona. Abril was an instrumental communications team leader in the Abril, I got a typo in here, I think, campaign, who defeated former Sheriff Joe Arpaio in 2016 and played a significant role in Proposition 206, which raised the minimum wage and paid sick days for Arizonans. Today, she's a chief of staff at Living United for Change in Arizona and Arizona Center for Empowerment, ACE, and is a board member of United We Dream Action. She utilizes her own personal experiences to continue to lead in this work because she cares deeply about building something for the community and their loved ones. Thank you very much for being with us today and for traveling here as well. Dreama Caldwell is one of the executive co-directors of Down Home North Carolina, or Down Home NC. Down Home NC is Caldwell's political home. Before being in leadership, she was a member of, oops, let me make sure. Before being in leadership, she was a member, that's it. Down Home NC works to support communities in rural and multiracial areas. She stands for equitable, fair, and just treatment of all people, especially marginalized and disadvantaged groups. She believes that all lives can truly only matter when Black and brown lives matter. Thank you very much for being with us. Janet Hernandez is a native of the U.S.-Mexico border and the proud daughter of a community organizer. She has over 15 years experience working with communities or community-based organizations to develop and implement community engagement strategies that impact their local communities. She has extensive experience working with diverse communities on advocacy, organizing, leadership development, public health, and electoral campaigns, and she is a strong believer in racial healing. For more than a decade, Janet has led voter engagement programs at Unidos US, formerly NCLR, and in 2016, and the 2016 presidential election led efforts there at a funder collaborative to mobilize millions of voters of color to the polls. Currently, Janet is an associate director, elections and voting at the Democracy Fund, our wonderful sponsor, of course, for this event today, so thank you, where she oversees 2 national initiatives to expand voting access to communities of color and to support efforts to strengthen our democracy. And she's a graduate of the American University and holds certificates from Georgetown University, Harvard Kennedy School of Government, and George Washington University School of Political Management. Okay. Let's move on to let's start our conversation with our first question. And this question actually is going to go out to all 3 of you, and I'll let whoever wants to jump in first on it. Many policymakers and advocates have worked to improve representation in our elections and government, but there's a lot of work to do to reach a truly representative democracy. What does a truly representative U.S. democracy look like to you, to each of you? Tell us your vision for the future. Since this panel is about the long game.
I can start.
Please.
It's okay. When I got the question, I was like, oh my God, this is a really hard question. What is my vision? But soon I realized that actually at Lucha, we practice this. We've been practicing with our members and visioning not only for right now, but for 20, 30, 50 years. Mm. And so I was like, easy. I just got to share with our members have shared on their vision, which is my vision as well. And so when I think about our members, I think about Maribel, or our vision, I think about Maribel, who is a teacher aide at one of our public schools, works 2 jobs, and after work, she's been organizing lucha listens, which are essentially community meetings where people talk about money and our state budget, and they envision for what they want to build. And through there is free childcare for everyone. There is universal healthcare, free universal healthcare, and lowering the voting age, and voting election day as a holiday. And I truly believe that the most boldest and joyous ideas for this vision come from people who live and experience these challenges every day. And I think about Jordy, who's organizing pizza night and video game nights with his high school peers, and they're talking about universal voting. And actually today, in a few hours, I'm very confused with the time zones right now. I don't know what time it's in Arizona. But in a few hours, they'll be introducing a bill, the Arizona Families Thriving Act, which will give paid family medical leave for workers, and one of them is his mom. And so when I think, again, our vision is really grounded on what people want for their lives and experience.
Thank you. Thank you. Who wants to go next?
I'll go. Yeah. So when I think about a truly representative U.S. democracy, I think about a democracy that represents the diversity of America, where all people have access to the ballot. I heard Mitchell talk earlier about urban-rural divide. We have rural chapters in North Carolina where there's one early voting site in a county where there's no public transportation. And so people do not have the same access as just the county over, where they have several voting sites, where they have weekend times when they can vote on Sundays. And so I think a truly representative U.S. democracy would look the same everywhere. Everyone would have access to the same opportunities. Some places wouldn't have 5 days of early voting, in some places 20 days. It would really be the same. And also, I am a formerly justice-involved individual, and I don't believe that we can have a representative U.S. democracy when formerly incarcerated people are left behind and not allowed to vote. And we've seen this happen in North Carolina, where people who are on felony probation were told they could vote. We ran out and registered all these folks, and then had to go back and say, no, if you actually show up to vote, you're gonna get a charge. And so those things just shouldn't exist in a truly representative democracy. And I would like to say one that works for working class people. Working class people actually are at work a lot of times when the polls are open. We don't have a holiday in this country where they can go and vote. And if they're not in a community where someone is telling them about early voting options, voting by mail, then they just don't know. And so just a way that we can make sure that everyone has access to the ballot.
Thank you. Janet?
Well, what else can I say? All of that. Plus, I think that for me, it's about struggling to be a multiracial democracy. It means that everyone, regardless of who you are, is able to have a happy and dignified life, where you don't have to struggle to be able to vote. You don't have to struggle to give your kids a good education. And one of the things that I wanted to share, given that all of that has been said, is that For me, it's very personal. I think for many of the panelists here, in 2019, my mom became a U.S. citizen, the fall of 2019. And we were very excited about her experience voting for the first time in 2020. But it didn't turn out to be the best experience, that could have been. She was able to vote, but I was here in Maryland. We got her registered, and we have the picture of the registration. We have a picture when she voted, but we couldn't find her voting location. And she went to vote, and she didn't show up, right? My nephew, who is DACA, went with her. And they said, oh, I don't think you could be helping. I had to call a nonprofit, have them on the phone, call them to figure out some help. She was able to vote at the end of the day, but this shouldn't happen. And we have the picture, and it's framed, and she's very happy. But a representative democracy means that everyone, regardless of who you are, has the right to vote. 2020 should not be an outlier with our voter registration rates. It should be higher, and it should be the norm. And somebody, I don't know who else from the speakers, said, being able to vote is just the key. Maybe it was Mattia. Then you have to turn the key, and you have to open the door, and then you have to walk in and see all the options that you have to make sure that your government represents your values and your interests. So to me, that's what it means.
Thank you. Next question, and this is for Abril. Excuse me. Before we discuss future strategies, what are some of the key successes, policy, advocacy, mobilizing, that you've seen that have moved us closer to a representative democracy, and how can these successes inform how we move forward?
Yes, so I feel like I'm going to list some of the tangible policies that we've have in Arizona, but I feel like I can't get there without really talking about what got us there. And in Arizona, it's been 14 years, at least for me and for Lucha, of constant organizing with communities who are and continue to be left out of a democracy. And so for us, it started, getting people out to vote to stop anti-immigrant laws like SB 1070 in 2010. And at that moment, it was very much us going and asking folks sharing our story with folks and saying like, look, there is this terrible law that is separating families. And one of the ways you can make a change is by voting this person out. And I think that was the beginning of people understanding like their power through voting. And many of us who are not able to vote were also able to understand that though we couldn't vote, we still have political power by getting others out and voting. And I think that was one of a threat became an inspiration for people to actually come out and vote and show up. And since there, communities have been, the engagement has increased, but it has only been through constant community conversations, through constant outreach and education. And so for me, most recently, one of the things that we're working on is, expanding. Currently in Arizona, folks have 4 hours to leave work and vote. And a lot of voters don't know this. And so for us to be able to expand the education on that, but also expand those 4 hours, what we really want is a holiday. But in the meantime, it's expanding it to early voting. And so it's an example of, of bipartisanship that we're doing, which is really difficult in this moment. But in the next few weeks, we'll be reintroducing this bill that was a result of what it looks policy by the people for the people, meaning this is a result of conversations, community conversations, and asking people for their vision of democracy. And so most recently, I think for me, democracy is not just voting, it also means the other things that impact people's lives to be able to be part of democracy. And so raising the minimum wage in Arizona in 2016 was also a big example of how people saw their impact of voting. It was the most popular thing on the ballot. And we raised the minimum wage for Arizonans and gave paid sick days. And it started from 5 for 15 conversations with workers. And most recently, last year, we passed Prop 308, which gave institution for dreamers and anyone who wants an education in Arizona. So I think, though we're still working, we have a lot of election deniers, but while we still are working towards the whole holiday, towards lowering the voting age, towards automatic voter registration, these other policies that are winning are part of what sort of helps people believe in this democracy, inclusive democracy.
Thank you. This next question is to Dreama. Let's talk about the election policy landscape in the U.S. What current election reforms, those designed to increase electoral access, because when you talk about election reforms, that term can mean different things to different people, different parts of the country, right? So we're talking about those designed to increase electoral access. What kind have the most momentum in terms of possible future state adoption? Where should advocacy investments be made?
Well, I live in North Carolina where we're actually always on the defense. So it's not much I can talk about that makes me really excited. I think it's important to talk about the voter suppression efforts of what's happening. As grassroots groups begin to grow and we begin to build power in our state, we see this tug of war happening as the political landscapes begin to shift in small rural towns. And so we actually just recently entered into a lawsuit against Senate Bill 747 that was meant, there was a part of it that was an undeliverable mail. Basically, if a person goes to register to vote, shortly after they register to vote, a piece of mail is sent out. And if it's returned, then their votes are thrown out along with their voter registration. And so we just recently won an injunction for that so that that doesn't occur for this election. But it is constant fighting with the courts. We have what's known as the activist courts in North Carolina, full of, hate to have this partisan, Republican judges that are literally undoing cases that had already been decided by the Supreme Court. And I talked earlier about helping people vote who had formerly had felony convictions. We also are seeing I just asked Mitchell earlier, I was like, what do we do? 70% of people in the county jails have not been convicted of a crime. That means they still should have access to the ballot. But we now have voter ID laws, and we're all trying to figure out how do we make sure they have their IDs so that they could vote. We worked around it before using clergy to go into the jails, to go in to make sure people knew how to request their ballots. But we don't know what we'll do for, I know that wasn't the question you asked, but voter suppression is happening all across the country, not just in North Carolina.
Thank you. Janet, what are some possible policy innovations election reformers that policymakers should be considering? Why and what impact will they have?
Sure. I would like to continue a little bit of what Dreama was saying, is that,
Please.
We are looking at the current context right now, and I think that we're in a moment in which voter suppression, gerrymandering, election sabotage are clear risks to our democracy. And I think that while we're looking at innovations, and I can mention some of the work that our grantees are doing, because at Democracy Fund, we believe that in order to get to a multiracial democracy, an inclusive multiracial democracy, people of color need to be part of the solution. And people of color need to be leading some of these efforts. Right now, about 75% of our grassroots funding, for example, is going to communities that are led by people of color. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. But I think that I want to recognize that we are at about 10 years since Section 5 of the VRA was where the pre-clearance was removed out of Section 5. And according to the Brennan Center, there's been at least 94 bills that have been passed and many more introduced at the state level. So we're in this constant state of there's an election and then there's a year off, but it's not really a year off. It's the year of the backlash with all the anti-voter bills that have been introduced at the state level. I think that there's this silver lining, right? There are organizations like those that are represented here today that in this moment are taking the opportunity to push for legislation that is proactive. I would also like to mention that I think 2020 gave us insight into what is possible with COVID, right? The ability in some states to be able to get your ballot in the mail and have fewer restrictions because of the pandemic. And so I think that there is a number of things that could be done. I think the model legislation in Michigan is a great example, right? They're going into 9 days of early voting. I think everybody's excited there. But there are other things, and I think it was mentioned. Election Day should be a holiday and it should be celebrated. And I know that there are organizations that are working on this. There should be an expansion to, vote by mail and early voting. And I couldn't agree more that the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, Advancement Act, should be passed. And there are organizations that are working on this at the national level and at the local level. At Democracy Fund, we're very much in supporting organizations to advocate not only for state level policy, but also to connect with what's happening at the federal level. So those are a few of those policies that I think should be pushed forward. And I would say that it isn't, we're in a moment in which organizations like Lupe are fighting SB1 and trying to make sure that people are able to vote at the same time. I think that making sure that Section 5 comes back to life is going to get us a little closer to a multiracial democracy.
Thank you. All right, next question. We're going to go back now to you, Abril. What steps are necessary to build long-term trust and engagement in communities that have often felt marginalized and disconnected from the political process?
I think what comes to mind with this question is really consistency. And what I know based on the community organizing that I've done is people are ready to open their door when there's people coming to them, not with the door hanger or talking points or a flyer. They're really ready when you come to have a genuine conversation and you are open to listen to their fears, their hopes, and you're able to get all of that and channel it into action. And so for us, the reason why we are where we are in Arizona, we build into our moment, the reason why, We've been able to pass a lot of proactive policies, and this is the first year that we are, or last year, we had one of the most like progressive state budgets in the history. The reason why we are there, it's because of the consistency that we've had in communities that are Black, Brown, Indigenous communities in rural Arizona. And so, and what I mean also consistency, I also mean genuine connections. And so, to get to this moment, we really gotta, again, listen to those folks, to community stories. So when I was going door to door in 2010, I wasn't talking to people about why was Arizona turning purple, or why the legislative landscape in Arizona was going to shift in a few years. I was going to them saying like, look, my family and I are undocumented. There is this sheriff who will, it's a threat to my family, where my family could be separated on our way to church, on our way to work, and I need you to come out and vote. I really need you. I need you to know that you have my back. And it was through like those stories, through shared values, the people showed up, and they continue to show up. And so, again, we're only here, a lot of times the federal level can be not so exciting, but when you have, and this is why we believe that local policies are so critical, because often people are able to see the impact right away. When we raised the minimum wage, people saw it on their check. When we won in-state tuition, their friends and family were able to enroll back to school. And so it's so critical that we continue to engage our communities in a genuine, consistent way, but also being able to find a local hope that they can grab to, while we continue to build for the vision that we have locally and federally.
Thank you. Dreama, what actions, strategies are needed to mobilize voters that are not currently being utilized at the local level, at the national level?
Yeah, so at Down Home, we spend a lot of time on doors talking to people. When we come into a new county, we are on the doors knocking and asking what keeps you up at night, and just listening to the things that really keep people up at night. And then we'll pose a question sometimes like, what do you want to do about it? And a lot of times people feel like there's nothing they could do about it. And so we take those listening sessions and the things that people care most about, and it could be something very local. For example, in Granville, we had a new chapter in Granville, and they had a park in the community that was very precious to the Black community that the city had just let go to waste. The basketball goals were gone. There was no other basketball goals in the community. And so we built a campaign with our members to ask for that park to be rehabbed. Most of the people who came into that chapter were not politically involved, and like many other people, believed that nothing would change and that politics was a waste of time. But they were able to build this campaign in the community and get all of this excitement and making appearances at the county commissioners meeting. And they were able to get a significant amount of money to redo this park. What happened then is that they were like, oh, what else can we do? And so now what we have is that we do an integrated base building model. And so we build base around issues and campaigns around things that mean the most for people. And then at the end of the campaign, we're able to debrief and figure out what went wrong or what went well, and then tie it to an election. And then we we go into an electoral campaign. What has happened in Granville is amazing. They've elected their first black sheriff, the first black sheriff they've had in the county's 276-year history. They elected a senator, and they've just elected a mayor of color who is a member of ours. And so those entry points into politics, we don't start at the top talking about up ticket. We start talking about the pothole in your neighborhood that no one's ever done anything with, and that your city council is responsible for it. And so those are ways that we get people involved. And then we also, we train our people if they're interested to run for office. We help them find trainings and give them trainings to run for office. When you have an electoral candidate that is from the community, that runs their campaign out of the community, and particularly from a marginalized community, you see an excitement happen that had never happened before. And it does translate up ticket. The other thing that works really well for us, the people that are knocking doors, we are not just parachuting in during election time. We are knocking doors during elections, after elections, before elections, so that by the time we come back to talk to you about who we believe encompasses our values, you've already built a relationship with us. We use local trusted members. So when I'm on the ground, when I'm canvassing with members, it's like, oh, this is my cousin's house. Oh, I go to church with them. Oh, we went to high school together. And so because of that, you can get people to open the door and have conversations. We know following the 2022 election that 75% of people who had contact with down home went to go vote. And so it's just getting out and getting on the doors. But the thing is that relationships are not microwavable. And we've seen this happen election after election after election. People come in and build these relationships with marginalized communities, show up in their churches, show up at their schools, and then they're gone. Mm-hmm. And this is what creates this distrust of people. And so the thing about what we do is people know when we come into your area, we're not leaving. We're still here, and we're looking to build a relationship, and we're gonna continue to build more power there. And so those are things for us that really, really works well, paying attention to things that really matter to people right now in the moment.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Janet, what role do nonpartisan funders play in supporting the long game? What investments should they make? And you can say that you're speaking for others or individually or whatever approach you want to take with this question.
Great, thank you. Well, I feel very proud to represent a foundation that not only believes in supporting people of color who are organizing, but also that believes in organizing funders. And that is hard, let me tell you. It is hard work. There are some things that we, in the spirit of trust, that we are doing right now, which is making sure that we're listening to what are the needs of organizations that are on the ground, fighting the fight. And that means that it is multi-year, more flexible funding. As of December for our power building portfolio, about 80% of our money for the next 2 years is already in the field. And that's important. Mm-hmm. And it's not just that, right? It's about, with the high level of threats that we're seeing to people of color in the field, and specifically women and women of color, what else can I do? It is being a grant maker plus. Mm-hmm. It is positioning our grantees to say, hey, you know what? I heard from our conversation that you need this type of work. Maybe it is racial healing, maybe it is something else, but what else? And how am I going to show up as a partner and being in power with them? Democracy Fund, and I can speak very little about this because there's a new initiative that we're launching later this week, but we are working. There are other funders actually here in the room that we invited to this event, so that they can hear from the great work that some of our partners are doing. In the field of election administrators, Democracy Fund was one of the very early funders to come in and start listening. What is it that we need? And now I think that we have huge power in being able to say, you know what? We know that there are organizations that are working on voter engagement, but how does that work translate to the power that we must have when it comes to election administration and getting more organizations to advocate for funding? I believe somebody was asking this question. And how do we get to diversify the field of election administration? We know that about 90 to 95% of individuals, administrators, are not people of color. So what else can we do about building these bridges? I would also say that when it comes to the innovations, I think that it is the same thing that organizers are doing. Getting funders to talk to other funders, get grantees to be in front of funders, right? And pushing others to move money sooner to the field because it is needed.
Okay, so the next question is for all three of you. You can jump in as you like. What rethinking should we be doing in the big picture? What larger systemic change needs to happen? This is a small question. What larger systemic change needs to happen to make community mobilization efforts easier, or perhaps not even needed in the ways that they are needed now? Who wants to jump in on that?
I can get started.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
we can go this way. And I wouldn't say that this is necessarily a great innovation, but if we're working towards a multiracial democracy, we are working with a lot of organizations that are working with specific communities. I would love to see more multiracial organizations that are bringing different types of people and different perspectives to the table, like the work that Dreama has been doing in the field, for example, in North Carolina. And so that we're not in our corner, each working on their own issue, but that we build multiracial and multi-issue coalition building.
Thank you. Dreama?
Yeah, I think I would say equitable distribution of resources, whether you're a battleground state or not, whether Sherry Beasley won or not, whether, all of these things that are a moment that doesn't build a movement. And so I think I see a lot of funders that are in it for the moment. And when the election doesn't go the way they want, or when the state doesn't change as fast as they want, people pull out. We're seeing this happen to our colleagues in Florida, where people are just not investing and they're left to try to figure it out. So I think that, and then just like long-term sustainability, what we're doing in North Carolina is not going to happen in 2 cycles. It's not going to happen in 3 cycles. It is long-term, which means we need long-term commitments. Our organizations build these really skilled and talented staff that do a lot of great work based on funding. And when we don't have the funding, we have to release them. On our C4 side, there's this contraction. We swell up and we hire all these people for elections. And then when the elections are over, we contract back down because there's no funding to keep those people long time. So every cycle, you're starting back at scratch, where you're having to onboard new staff and go through the whole cycle again and again. So these type of things really make it really hard in mobilizing when you don't have long-term commitments. If you ask me what keeps me up at night, 2025 keeps me up at night. Mm-hmm. How am I going to keep my staff on in 2025 in a moment where my state may be in pure chaos and I possibly will have to let most of my staff go on the C4 side? That keeps me up at night.
yes to what folks are saying. And I think what made me think about is, yes, we need to continue to innovate. How do we build people power? But for us, it's also how do we help our communities build economic power and self-determination? And so I think about what would it look if we had the resources, the right resources for people to, take a week off and be in a room, the most beautiful place where they feel the most creative to vision for 50 years, for 60 years. I wonder what would happen versus just bringing them in the room when we need their endorsement or, and so those are things that we are doing at Lucha in a smaller level, but I can imagine if we bring all of these communities that are marginalized to this one room and think, I almost feel like it's not gonna be so different because they all have like a collective struggle and they'll have the most wildest, beautiful, joyful ideas on the future we wanna build. But when I said economic power, I think when we talk about an inclusive democracy, it's beyond just the electoral and the civic engagement part. It's like the wholesome of a person and their livelihood. And so, for us, what would it look to have folks? And I know some organizations are already doing it across the country. And for us, we're gonna start teaching people how to harvest water, how to produce their own electricity. And I think. We're really excited at Lucha this year. We've been dreaming for 5 years to how to, continue to do the work and work with funders to get the funding, but also how do we create some independent revenue. And so right before coming here, we filed for IAN for our LLC, our Lucha LLC, who's gonna hopefully generate money to build our cultural center where my mom can have access to a kitchen so she can make her delicious quesadillas and sell them. And so the county doesn't have to be chasing her around for a license, where we can have a panaderia, a bakery, where our people can sell their goods. And so I think thinking about economic power.
The path to representative democracy has been a long one and is far from over. We know that, right? How do we keep community members, advocates, policymakers motivated to continue to invest in this goal? Dreama?
I think for me, first of all, I think all of our strategies have to be joy-centered strategies. Mm-hmm. In a time where the world is on fire, everything is happening, joy is central. And if we are not having fun, nobody's coming. And so celebrating progress, even when it's small, even when you win a basketball goal, even when you are able to prevent evictions in your county, like small things, learning how to celebrate them. And then also finding the wins and losses. In 2020, I ran for office as the first Black female to run for county commissioner, lost the race, but we had 34,000 people that voted, and we increased Black voter turnout 53% that year. So the county was a wash. Everybody that wasn't Republican was a wash. But what happened was on the state level, because people were excited about my race, Ricky Hurtado was able to get elected to the House by just a little over 600 votes. And so really being excited and being excited when people do show up and making it fun. We have a lot of fun at the polls. We have parties to the polls. We have food at the polls until they make that illegal. Because I'm sure it's coming, right? But right now we do. We have a lot of fun and getting people there. And then just we do this thing called deep canvassing. It's not the one-off conversation. It's really 15, 20, 30 minutes of front porch conversations with people where our organizers or our volunteers are sharing their own personal experiences as well as listening to other people's personal experiences while trying to move them through a conversation. In rural North Carolina, we can't afford to throw anybody away. So even if you don't think like us, even if you don't vote like us, we're gonna knock on your door and talk to you, because what I do know is that you want safe schools, you want a safe community, and we have some of the same values. And so rather than getting caught up in the culture wars, we spend time bringing people back to values and talking about values and talking about candidates that have our values. That means that sometimes our members endorse Republicans that are local because they have their values. And sometimes they don't. But that is where we try to hold our conversations is in values, so we don't get caught up in the culture wars.
Thank you.
I can echo food, music, culture, party buses, all of it, parades. I literally had fun underlined.
Me too.
I think about two things. I think obviously fun, joy, culture, food, and I'll share a little bit more of that and how we live that. But the other thing that I think about is meeting people's immediate needs. And so when we talk to someone and inviting them to stay for the long run, it's hard to be talking to someone about a legislative agenda when they're getting evicted, or when their DACA is expiring, they don't have the fees to pay, or when they lost their job. And so I really think about like seeing the person and holding the person as a whole. And so supporting to get the services, the immediate needs that they have, to then do the political education, collecting at the value level, and showing them how this is part of a structure or a system, and being able to then take them into action. And so an example, a story I have, Maite, she is a DACA recipient who lost their renewal process. She couldn't renew because she couldn't afford $595 that we have to pay. And so because of that, her business license expired, and so she had to shut down her business. And all of that was as a result of COVID. So when she came to us asking for help, we were able to get the support that she needed to renew her DACA. Then she renewed her business license. And now she's organizing mercados, or farmer markets, with other small businesses across the state, despite the fact that DACA is, in a very uncertain way. And so when I think about how do we keep people like Maite motivated and actually ready to continue despite what's happening around us, I really think that she's able to see her own personal power when she's building economic power and people power with other small businesses. And so for me, it's like democracy, really similar to what you said, is like if we are grounded and rooted in people and people's stories, we're just so resilient that we're able to reframe victory and what winning means. And so, for her, the fact that she is organizing and that she is bringing people together, that's a huge victory. Again, under the uncertainty that, DACA could end pretty soon. And so I think about joy and fun and culture. We need to have beautiful things for our people. And what that means is like colorful, cultural relevant materials to invite people into our spaces. And for us, that looks like having a parade in one of the neighborhoods that has the lowest voter participation with the marching band that played for Cardi B and mariachi and passing out packs for carne asada, for a barbecue.
Food theme going on.
Yes, yes. For us, it means chilaquiles and conversations with candidates, conchas and community. We have burritos and ballots. And so when you do things that people already do in their own communities, it doesn't feel like so inaccessible, which at times it could feel like that. And I feel like people will show up when you show up for them as a whole.
Reframing victory with food.
Eh?
Yeah, and fun.
Well, let me tell you, I cannot wait to go to this Lucha Cultural
Yes.
Center because it's going to be fun. And I'm sure there'll be great food. I think that, for me, I go back to my childhood and what my mom would always say, which is to go forward, you need to look back, look at your roots, look at where we've been before. And for many communities, this isn't new. And to bring in MLK, we know what it looks like. Both of you have described what that dream looks like. And for me, I feel like that's where I want to stay and bring that to conversations with our grantees. We're in this shifting process internally in the way that I want to engage, and we should be engaging as a funder with grantees, where at the top of our conversations, we're like, how are you? Share something joyful, right? And I think we're like, what? You're asking me this question? Yes, we should be enjoying our positive work while we're engaging. And I think, Dreama and Abril just shared the dream. And that's where I want to stay with them.
Can I just mention something I didn't mention? I think a big part of democracy, what we're talking about, expanding the electorate, that is really tricky, expanding the electorate. And sometimes it takes unconventional thought processes. For instance, The Color Purple just came out, and Warner Brothers did this thing where they allowed nonprofits to do advanced showings of The Color Purple. It gave us an opportunity to pull people into our universe that they weren't in van because they've never voted. Mm-hmm. And so we literally bought out theaters in different counties of the state and had a full theater. We were able to show it 2 weeks before it actually was released. And now we have been able to absorb about 70% of those people into our organization. So when you're thinking of expanding the electorate, thinking outside of the box of going where people are, the barber shops, the hair salons, working with the local car clubs, working with, the local soccer teams, you really digging into culture and finding where people are and not expecting them to come to us and us going to them.
Thank you for adding that. So we're going to turn to Q&A. So how do we have conversations in our own local networking groups that expand democracy in nonpartisan ways, or just
nonpartisan ways, even though we're partisan?
In nonpartisan ways?
I think about in the Black community how instrumental the Black church was, and the church has to play a nonpartisan role. The church really can be used in participation and how big it is to hear your pastor that you're at Sunday after Sunday to say we're gonna all register everybody to vote afterward, or we're gonna take the van and we're gonna go over to Souls to the Polls to vote. So finding places of synergy where people are, churches, like I said, we use bike clubs, where people are. Sometimes it's a concert, and then here comes the clipboards, here I come ready to talk. So it's just, I think it's a regular conversation, really. I usually like to just start with explaining people that you weren't poor simply because your family didn't work hard enough. Like just starting there and then going into the conversations. And I think one of the things that I hear from a lot of people when you talk to people about why they don't engage because they think it doesn't matter. So you have to help them understand how it matters. And the truth is they voted before and their life hasn't changed. And so you have to be honest about that and say, that's right. And this is what happened. And so I just think it's having honest and brave conversations. And particularly with younger voters, they're gonna throw it all at you why they don't wanna deal with it, why they don't wanna vote for Biden, why they don't wanna vote for this. But I think you have to actively listen, sit and listen and hear that and then engage in conversation from that. But just don't write people off. Just keep talking.
So the question is, how do you navigate disagreement on what to fund? What to fund in the movement as you're building the movement.
It goes back to the listening, right? I mean, there are many foundations out there that focus on a number of different things. But I think that for us, it's about how we developed our strategy, which was really about listening to not just the numbers or the data, but speaking with partners about what are the things that we must fund. And also looking at maybe locations or maybe regions where other funders are just not going to, right? So to give you an example, we are now very early year 2 of 5-year strategies. One is for building people power. And we are also, as we're onboarding organizations and we're talking to them, we're asking, how do you feel about this role that is new for you? What type of support might you need, right? And we're hearing the same things across the state, in North Carolina, in Arizona, in Tennessee. And so that's where the energy goes. And also, how do we complement? Because we can't do it all. We know that there is right now a bridge we need to build between election administration and voting and access to voting, right? And right now they're worlds apart, but it shouldn't be. So that's an area for us where we can come in. And to give you an example about, let's say, Texas, it's huge. Do we have enough to be able to provide to many grantees in the state? No. But we're going to areas where we know there's been an underinvestment. And that means supporting organizations along the RGV and also in the north, right? In the area of Dallas. So it really goes back to where is the most need? Where are other funders maybe not going? And where is it possible to make a difference if we invest in leadership, in local and state leadership?
Can I just share?
Please.
Just because I heard you say there's funders in the room. So funders in the room, we need unrestricted money. We need long-term investments. We need simple grant reports or no grant reports. Simple applications, and trust us with the money. We are on the ground. Our plans may need to shift and change. When you bound us to deliverables, that means that we are setting our programs to your deliverables rather than doing what needs to happen on the ground. So unrestricted, multi-year, and simple.
Can I be can I? Two things that
I'll just say really quickly for our Zoom viewers, there was a lot of agreement in the room with the comments that Dreama just made. So I want to lift that up. Yeah.
Thinking about so the first question kind of relates to the second question folks asked. I think when we're also doing deep canvassing in Flagstaff, which is the northern area of Arizona, we target a particular neighborhood of non-people of color to talk about immigration last year. And so it was hard. It was an experiment because we were like we need everyone who is willing to participate, and we can't leave, we can't just not go ask. We should go ask. And we ran this experiment about talking to people about what they knew about immigrants. And I'm not gonna repeat all the narratives, but very popular narratives that are on the news. We asked them where are they getting their information from, and it was from the news. And then we asked them if they knew someone who was immigrant. And they were, I remember this particular story about this guy. He's like, oh yeah, my neighbor down the street who cuts my yard, it's an immigrant. And how do you feel about him? He's a great person, all of these good things. And we're like, well, this is like the immigrant stories that we know as immigrants. And you know it because you actually know the person. So why would it look for you to support a pathway to citizenship for all immigrants? And so, in this term of reframing victory or win, we were grading them in a scale 1 through 5. And so they were starting at 1, no, I'm not supporting. And we saw the majority of our conversations move to a 3 or even a 4, a few to a 5, where it's like, I'm ready to support, Senator Mark Kelly, et cetera, et cetera. But it was through that experiment that we were able to get reaffirmation that there is some hope, that we need to go and invest and talk and have those conversations. And now we actually have an a hybrid office there, and we're building in the university. All of that to say is it took a funder to provide the funding for us to explore. Did we say we were gonna move people to immigration to be a 5? No, it was whatever we find, we're okay with it. And so that reminded me of unrestricted funding to experiment and test out things. Because when we are restricted to certain things, we already have our plan ready to deliver, and we will, and we have been. So if we have a track record, just trust us. But then if you provide that, you actually give us the spaciousness to be creative, to be innovative, to come up. And in those moments, I think we come up with the best versions of our plans for our communities. That's how we came out with the parades and the cultural center. But yeah, it's just wanted about that.
So trust us.
Yes.
Well, we are going to end our panel now. I want to thank all 3 of our panelists. This has been a great conversation. Thank you so very much for being with us today.